anything will, if anything will put a smile on your face, it's Justin's music. So, Key or Jennifer, did you guys want to say something first?
No, Bill, the show is all yours. Thank you.
Oh, is it? Great. Well, thank you so much. Well, Blair and I are just delighted to be a part of Philanthropy Club presentation this morning. As you can see on the screen, we've asked you to put a little bit of information about yourself in the chat. This is Blair's wonderful idea, so please do that. Put your contact information in there and something about how you're feeling today, and then we'll launch into this presentation, or we can just stop and listen to more music if that's what you guys would like to do. So
that's all I got.
Well, I would say after that, I'm certainly feeling jazzy, bright. These are great. These are wonderful feelings, joyful, energized. Good morning, everyone. My name is Blair Janis, and I think perhaps that my colleague who inspired this moment, maybe here she'll be joining us in a bit. I think after Justin's, if you go back one, Bill, yeah. After Justin's jazzy introduction, hopefully we're all in a good space this morning, but wanted to have just a moment to kind of settle into and focus on, why we're here today. We had a wonderful presentation from Megan Whitney, who's currently with Feeding America, did this exercise called A Minute to Arrive. And the idea, and she does this with her teams in all their meetings, is taking just a moment to settle in. So if you were running from meeting to meeting, you're trying to get kids to school, doing any number of things this morning, taking a moment to take a deep breath, roll your shoulders a few times. If you have your video off or you want to turn your video off and take a big stretch, just get a feel for your space, and centering on this idea of thinking about why you do what you do and why you are part of the organizations that you are, why you're committed to our community and our collective, and advancing those things through philanthropy in the work that we do. And so just taking a moment to, if you want to close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, roll your shoulders, stretch, get a sip of water, but trying to kind of center on why it is that we're here. And we're so glad that you're here and that you've joined us. So as we move throughout our time today, we hope that you'll continue to engage in the chat and appreciate all of those of you who are introducing yourselves this morning. Today we'll be talking about navigating the intersection of annual and major gifts. My name is Blair Janis. I'm a senior director of development at DePaul University and work in support of a handful of college units and the larger university there, and feel so lucky to be here with all of you today, including my former colleague, wonderful colleague and friend, Bill Lynerd, who I'll invite to introduce himself.
Sure. So I worked at DePaul, and some of you know, I took an early retirement package from them back in the summer with about 100 or more of my colleagues, not from advancement, of course, but I knew I wasn't going to retire, and this opportunity came up to serve at the Field Museum doing major gifts and in charge of the plan giving program. So I started here about 2 weeks ago, and I'm delighted to be a part of this team, but I'm also very happy to have Blair. She is such a bright young colleague. She started a couple of years ago at DePaul and instantly was generating these major gifts in a portfolio that hadn't seen it for a while. So we're very fortunate to have her in this field and as part of this presentation today. So here's what we're going to do. We're just going to talk through a couple of things in the spirit of there's nothing new under the sun. There's a lot of wisdom among all of the people who are participating here today, a lot of wisdom, experience. Some of these things you've heard before, probably many times. Good to be reminded of them. Some of them maybe you haven't. But Blair will talk a little bit about the giving cycle. We'll talk about how we define major and annual fund gifts. We'll talk about how these two things intersect. We will both share some insights from the major donors with whom we have worked, and then we'll give plenty of time for questions, discussions. There will also be a couple of moments throughout the presentation where we'll ask you to put something into the chat. So Blair, take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bill. So thinking about the relationship cycle, which I'm sure is something that we're all familiar with in some capacity, and I think that this is very broadly applicable, certainly to major and annual giving, but really to any type of engagement. For many years, I worked in peer-to-peer fundraising, and participant engagement, follows a similar cycle. So I think that this is broadly applicable across work in fundraising. So a reminder of the relationship cycle, we start with identification, introduction, and qualification. So identifying folks who may be potential supporters of our organization, folks who are already supporters in some capacity. Maybe they've made a singular gift, maybe they've been a low-level annual donor, making some sort of introduction with them, whether that is direct outreach from yourself or an introduction from a peer or a colleague, which we'll talk about a bit later. And then qualification. We are so fortunate, I think, in this work, often to be supported by folks doing prospect research and prospect management. And it can be so helpful to have an understanding of what it is that these folks are doing in other spaces. So are they major gifts? Are they already major gift donors at another organization? Oftentimes giving levels, as our giving societies are published, are public information unless they've requested that to be anonymous. And so it can be helpful if you're asking someone for a gift to understand what they have given in the past to others. If you can page back one, Bill. But there are a variety of things that go into qualification, including other publicly available information that might give you an idea of what their capacity might be. Moving on to cultivation and engagement. So we all know that the first time that we meet someone, we are more than likely not asking them to make the biggest gift of their lifetime. But that it's important that we develop a relationship. We understand what's important to them and how that aligns with the needs of our organization or institution. And engage them in a meaningful way so that they feel valued and appreciated, and also understand really acutely the needs of the organization and what you're trying to achieve, which would ultimately lead us to solicitation. So making that match between the organizational needs and the passions and interests of the person or persons you're working with to formally solicit them for a gift. And then continuing that cycle to stewardship, which I think can be so critical, particularly in planned giving, when we work often with people who planned gifts almost always are things that are revocable bequests. So people can change their minds at any time. And of course they can, with their relationship to your organization as well. And so it's really important that you demonstrate the impact of their gift, keep them closely engaged, and continue on this cycle, that after someone makes a gift, you don't just drop off in hearing from them or them hearing from you. And such continues the cycle, hopefully, to continue to engage folks.
Yeah, we've referred to that sometimes as the infinite loop. If you've done your job well and you've stewarded the gift, the people will continue on that cycle and they'll get introduced to something perhaps different at your organization, but they'll stay engaged with you. Sorry, Blair, I keep admitting people, and sometimes
Oh, no, not to worry.
In doing so, I hit the next page. So
yeah.
I apologize for that.
So as we continue, we think it's important to establish kind of a shared definition of what are we talking about when we talk about annual and major gifts. So on the next slide, would love to hear from all of you because it does differ across organizations. How do you define major gifts? And that more than likely includes a giving threshold, whether that's $5,000, $50,000, $100,000. It really depends on your organization, your community and pool of donors. And would be curious to hear from you all what that looks like for your organization and how you would define annual gifts, which hopefully in its name is helping us understand that those are folks who are giving at least once annually, but hopefully again and again. And I know many of us are familiar with engaging annual donors or trying to engage them as the fiscal year ends, pulling those lists of last year but not this year's donors, or some years but not yet this year, and trying to encourage them to make a gift again. And while folks maybe think about that or share in the chat, I think Bill will share a bit about how we're seeing annual and major gifts for the context of our time together today.
Yeah, thanks very much, Blair. So Blair and I, and you as well, see both annual and major gifts as kind of this confluence. This is a really interesting image of a real confluence of two rivers. And I think there, at least in my mind, there's a reason why the major gifts is a little bit less clear than the flow of annual gifts. The annual gifts, of course, as Blair said, we'll talk about them in greater detail a little bit later, but they're often repeatable. But we all define major gifts in lots of different ways, depending upon the organization. And we even have some subdivisions within, whether they might be leadership gifts or principal gifts, but they all have certain characteristics to them. But we have this blending of major and annual gifts, and they come together and they help organizations sometimes stay afloat, but often, and we hope all the time, do the major impactful things that we do as an organization. So annual gifts, as Blair said, they're easily repeatable. If you do your job well, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, you'll get people giving over and over again. And annual gifts even vary in size, but pretty much these are gifts that people can make to you without thinking too much about it. And they vary in size, and they're often a great source of helping organizations do what they do best. Annual gifts typically don't go for special projects, although for some organizations they can. And again, they come in various shapes and sizes. Major gifts, on the other hand, are often gifts that make a really significant difference for the organization. We call it transformative. They move a program, or they move a facility, they move something along in a really major way. And typically, they are more specific in nature. There are some individuals who give major gifts just for the operations, but usually they're for a specific purpose. I'm as old as some of the dinosaurs at the Field Museum, so I've been around since the previous generation would say, "Listen, here's $100,000. I really trust your organization. You're doing a great work. Use this in whatever way possible." And then I've seen this transformation to another generation who want to do much more specific things with their gifts. And I'm sure that you encounter this all the time as well. Usually a major gift, sometimes they're made outright, sometimes they're made in the form of a pledge, which people will pay over the course of time. And again, as Blair said earlier, they vary depending upon the organization. But major gifts also, for the most part, require a lot of thought. You have to be strategic about them. You have to use that relationship cycle and bring them along. And it has this kind of a longer time frame. Although I've been engaged in some major gifts that have happened like within weeks of an introduction, but that's an extremely unusual. I've also had major gifts take 10 years to come to fruition. So they vary.
So
Blair.
we want to hear from you in thinking about how your organization interacts with, or how do you interface with major gifts? Seeing all the wonderful organizations represented in the chat. We of course don't necessarily know though, how do you work with major planned gifts or annual gifts at your organization? So would love to hear a little bit from you all, what your experience has been, Are you soliciting major gifts? Are you preparing briefings and research? Are you helping to steward those gifts and make sure that the impact is demonstrated and reported to donors? Or if you do engage closely in major gifts and plan gifts, we would ask that you share a notable strategy that your organization uses, something that others can learn from. So we hope that as we continue on, you'll share a bit about how it is that you engage in this work. And it's okay if it's not at all, or if it's not something that your organization is yet doing, or if you are the sole person doing all development at your organization. This may be something that is one of many hats that you're wearing. So are excited to have folks with a wide variety of roles here with us today, and would love to hear from you as we continue. And to that end, no matter what your role is or how you interface with major gifts at your organization, I think it's important to acknowledge that major gifts, fundraising, advancement, development, whatever we want to call it, is a team sport, even if you are a one-person team. But I love this this image here. I saw this, I think this donor relations group on online, maybe a few months ago, thinking of, we may hear about or see publicity for a press release or, an event celebrating the gift of a lifetime, someone who has made a tremendous commitment to an organization. And often the person, who's introducing them or who may be, working closely with them, that might be, the head of your organization, the major gift officer who they've been working with, others who were closely involved, with that person directly. But none of that happens or can happen without all of the other folks involved here. So whether you have a team of folks doing this or you are managing this work yourself, prospect research and development, so understanding who potential prospects are, who are already connected with or could be connected with your organization, donor relations, making sure that if you have completed that cycle with someone, if you've solicited them, gotten a gift, that you're reporting back out on the impact of that gift. If you are required to have any sort of reporting with them, say they establish an endowed fund, that you are reporting on the progress and health of that fund, the impact that it's having, giving them that information regularly. Advancement services, making sure that your records, whatever CRM you use, is updated and available so that you can get the information that you need and that you can see over the course of time how someone has been engaged with your organization, even if you specifically haven't been the one there doing that engagement. Alumni relations or community relations, depending on your type of organization. But these events really keep people engaged over time, keep them closely connected to your organization, inspire them and educate them about the things that you're doing. And of course, annual giving, because as someone develops a pattern of giving, they are staying more closely connected with your organization. Their contact information is being updated each year. And hopefully they're being engaged over time so that as their capacity grows to give, so too does their gifts to your organization. So it really, I think, is incumbent upon all of us to recognize that this is a collaborative effort and is not just the success or efforts of one person that lead to a major gift happening. And I see many folks in the chat sharing about how they engage with major gifts, and a few questions, which we'll definitely have time to talk through as we continue.
Yeah, great. So let's break to one of those. McKinsey says, how do folks assign donors between annual and major gift officers? Is there an overlap? Do you think about those donor relationships when people might give in different ways? And McKinsey, from my experience, it depends really on the organization. If you're large enough to have an annual giving team, sometimes that team will take on sort of leadership annual gifts. We had that at DePaul, so gifts of a certain level, members of the annual giving team worked on forming those relationships. which, by the way, was a great training ground for them, for the individuals on staff to ultimately move to major gifts if that's their desire, because there really is this overlap. In my experience, people who give major gifts, you don't want them to stop giving their annual gifts necessarily, which is a little bit counterintuitive. You know, somebody's giving you a $5,000 and all of a sudden you're asking them for 100, and then you're also asking them to continue their 5,000. It doesn't happen like that all the time, but sometimes it does. So there is this overlap. And how do you think about the donor relationship when people give in different ways? You know, again, it goes back to careful research and the development of that relationship with the donor herself or himself, and determining what inspires them. Talking about the way your organization is making a difference and what part of that difference would they like to be a part of. So we'll come back to some of these other comments in a few minutes. Oh, so let me go back to this.
Yeah, and I think importantly too, it's important to recognize, you know, who has had a connection with that person. So if a leadership annual giving, you know, director, manager had a great connection with somebody, and in that conversation they discover, or that person talks about wanting to make a major gift, in my mind, and I think in, you know, the way that our office operates, is that I would do everything I could to support that leadership annual giving person, but to have the relationship still stay with and be carried by them, because they've established that relationship and connection. So not shuffling donors around simply for the purpose of what threshold their gift falls in, because that would be a difficult experience for them. And I think also, you know, can create a tension internally, versus a collaborative environment between folks who are working with donors at all levels.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the people who really succeed in this field tend to be gracious individuals who work cooperatively with team members rather than competitively. I mean, it's great to have competition. It can be friendly competition, but you know, in my experience, working with people and sharing credit and sharing in the relationship with owners is just such a really important thing. I like to refer to this dating back to when I worked at the University of Maryland. We used to call a member of staff a campus citizen, in that person embodied this knowledge of what goes on across campus, so that if she or he was working with a donor who may not have a specific interest in the thing that they were representing, you would be instantly aware of something across campus that might inspire that person to give. And you would, sorry, I was admitting somebody. Jennifer, I'm not sure, it keeps popping up on my screen to admit folks, so I'll do that. But anyway, this campus citizen person would think about more than just what was on his or her plate, to look for opportunities that benefited the institution overall, not just specifically what she or he was working on. So let's jump into a little bit more detail about annual gifts. Blair mentioned this when she was talking about the relationship cycle, and that is, you know, do not take annual gifts for granted. Do not take for granted that people will do this over and over again if you're not doing really good stewardship. And my very simple definition for stewardship is making somebody feel good about what they've done for you, whether it is to volunteer or to give you an annual gift, to give you a major gift, to serve as a bridge to other people for you, an advocate for you. Make those individuals feel really important, regardless of the size of that. Obviously, there are certain things you have to do for really significant donors, but I try to treat everyone the same in terms of making them feel good about what they're doing. And again, don't just make the assumption that they're going to give to you because you send them an appeal once or twice a year, or as this next point says, more often. Don't over ask or over communicate with your donor base. Now, I'm sure some of you in the audience or in this group will probably take issue with that, but There's nothing that makes me more uncomfortable as a donor than getting an ask right after I've made a gift. I think sometimes we get advice from people who say, you know, you got to ask a whole lot of times in order to get people to give. But from my experience as a contributor and my experience organizationally, I try to make sure that, you know, there's some space. Don't send a thank you with a return envelope in it asking people to give again. You know, that can really turn people off sometimes. There are people who respond to that, but from my perspective, it's just not a good thing. Recognize, go ahead, Blair, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was going to say there's a good question in the chat, which I think is related to what you were saying there, with over communicating or over asking. Rich asked, can you give an example of over communicating with annual donors? And I think, you know, to your point, Bill, having every communication be a solicitation or not acknowledging when they have made a gift. So if you are not segmenting donors throughout a campaign and cycling out those who have given as a result already to that campaign, or if you've spent a lot of time really creating a structure around soliciting them, but not around stewarding them. We have tried to do things in outreach we use a tool called ThankView, which is a video kind of email service. But things like that feel like really personalized touch points, even though they are, you know, being sent to thousands of people or to a large volume of folks, but making sure that if you are asking someone for an annual gift and they're giving, that you're thanking them and having other touch points versus every single touch point with them, whether it's mail or email or otherwise, being a solicitation.
Yeah, and Rich, another comment on the over communication is you don't want to numb people. You don't want them to get something from you so often that they stop looking at your stuff. I often said to the folks at DePaul that sometimes we sent them way too many things. We would look in our database and we would see that somebody has received like 14 communications over the last 6 months for various things. It might be a news item, it might be an annual giving ask, it could be anything else. Often really good things, but from my perspective, after a while you get numb to it. You think, oh, yeah, that's another communication from such and such an organization. I'll go back to that at some point. And they may just miss a really important ask. So then the other thing is, and I've had this experience that someone will give to you a small gift, and this is kind of a test of what your organization is like in terms of A, how you value that gift, B, how you respond to it and thank them, and C, more importantly, how you actually use the gift. In fact, it was really interesting. I closed a $1.3 million gift this past spring for DePaul from a person who actually sent a $5,000 contribution because she was connected through a friend. They had no connections with DePaul, but she said to me at one point in this relationship, I basically wanted to see how you guys were going to do with this gift. And I'm telling you, I tend to do this sometimes. I tend to get really over involved in thanking people and sending stuff to them. But in this particular case, it was very, very beneficial. So look at all of the gifts that come into you, even the small ones. Take time sometimes to look at the donors and to see who they might be. I realize that some of us wear many, many hats and you don't have the capacity to do all of that. But you know, when you get a minute, look at the donors that are giving you. You will be really surprised sometimes who is giving you a small annual gift, who has the really great capacity. So before we move on to the next one, any other thoughts, Blair?
Yeah, I think related to that, if you have the systems in place to maybe personalize things as you're able. So for example, you know, like Bill was mentioning with the auto communications, you know, we want I know volume is important in annual giving. And if you're already working with someone, do you have something like a do not solicit via email code? You know, can you build things like that into your processes so that someone that you're working with on a major principal gift is not also getting emails asking them to give $25? So if you can be intentional about those processes, you can make your life a little easier when it comes to managing the over communication that can happen.
So Blair, I am trying to move to the next screen. For some reason, it is not responding. Here we go.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So thinking about major gifts, and just kind of continuing what we've been discussing, I think is thinking about folks who are already giving to you in some capacity, and hopefully having in your system the ability to see their lifetime giving, the years that they've been giving to your organization, because those things can be a helpful tool, particularly I think when it comes to planned giving, but even for thinking about someone's overall level of commitment and engagement and the areas in which, or things that are important to them. If you have a variety of funds, you can see, you know, what has been important to them. Determining their individual capacity. So again, if you're lucky to have a prospect research team or person who can compile some of this information, or as you're thinking about who might be a part of a major gift portfolio for your organization, you can certainly utilize information like other gifts that they make, which again, as I mentioned earlier, are typically publicly available in either giving societies, or if they are, you know, a trustee of another organization, or even a simple Google search will of their name will often return other publicly listed giving societies, where they live. I think it's not as weird as it sounds, in that all of, you know, property tax and public records related to the sale of property are public information. So if someone, it's, I think, an imperfect tool, because someone's home may not, you know, demonstrate their ability to give to you in one way or another, but that is publicly available information. And then I think importantly, insights from other folks who know them. So who have either, you know, worked closely with them. In my case, that may be as a faculty member who's worked closely with someone on a project that they're passionate about, or others within your network who have those established relationships. So even if they're giving elsewhere is not, you know, disclosed online, you know, you may hear from someone that they made a long-term commitment to another institution or organization. So using all those things together, but I think ultimately identifying what it is that they value and having at some point a direct conversation about what it is that they're interested in doing, and what, you know, level of gift and involvement that they want to have with your organization. And I think one of my colleagues and Bill's, Rich Good, often uses this line: if you have truly no idea how much money you should be asking someone for, or how much money, you know, they're interested in giving, but you have an inkling that it is significant. I think he's used this line before, in that, you know, I have a very difficult job in which I have to ask folks for their support without having any idea, you know, what it is that they're capable of related to giving. So if this is way outside of what you were thinking, or your budget, or, you know, what have you, you know, I don't want you to take offense or any, you know, so just kind of couching that with, you know, this context that, of course, we don't know exactly what someone can give if you are in that specific situation.
Yeah,
Any
I've
other?
had people say to me, "Oh, you flatter me thinking that I could give that much." But again, you don't want to. I think if you ask for something larger than people have the capacity, but if you do it in a really nice and thoughtful way, they're not going to get offended. Most people won't. But you also don't want to under ask. So.
Yeah. I work with a wonderful donor who who made a commitment just before I began in my position, and someone who had worked with them said, I knew that I hadn't asked them for enough money when they responded like within a millisecond, that absolutely they could do that. You know, it was no problem, because for them that was kind of pocket change. And so I don't know that that's a perfect tool, but I would agree with Bill that I would rather ask for more and then have a conversation. But hopefully taking some of that guesswork out, that you've had substantive conversation with them throughout the course of that cycle, so that you're understanding what is important to them, where else they're giving, how much they're giving to your organization, which of course you would have access to, and then finding that alignment with what is most compelling to them. What is the thing that they can have a transformative impact on at your organization, you know, at a variety of levels. And I think that that is really important in trying to get to a place where your organization's needs are met, and someone being in a place to consider making a gift larger than they ever have, or committing a portion or the entirety of their estate through a legacy gift to your organization. As we discussed, I think it can often be helpful to engage someone who is a peer to them, whether that is, again, a faculty member or a staff member of your organization. Is it a higher level administrator, whether that is, you know, the chief development officer of your organization, or anyone who may have a pre-established connection with them, or who may be able to kind of help bridge their interests and the organization's needs, and help create a kind of lob up, if you will, the opportunity to make an ask to them. And I think this question is always helpful. You know, if you aren't sure, but you've been having wonderful conversation with someone, at some point you really need to get to that point of asking. And if they are not as direct as some donors can be extremely direct, which is helpful often, asking if they would be willing to consider a proposal, because that's opening the door for you to have a more specific conversation with them, putting a timeline on that conversation, and I think can be helpful. Otherwise, we can be stuck in like the constant cultivation cycle. But part of our role, and is incumbent on us to the missions of our organization, is to get to asking. So,
yeah, I'd like to add just a couple of other things to Blair's comment about determining capacity. You know, depending upon the size of the organization and your internal capacity, there are lots of different tools. You know, at DePaul, we use a number of different technical tools. Here at the museum, we use Blackbaud analytics. We use Thomson Reuters. Blair mentioned real estate. You know, that is it can be a good indicator depending upon where somebody lives, but not always, because maybe they've had the home for 40 years. And yes, it might be worth $1.5 million, but that doesn't mean that they've got that kind of resource to give you $1.5 million. You know, a lot more individuals are given through family foundations now, through donor advised funds. You know, obviously look at what they're doing with other people. Blair mentioned the peer-to-peer solicitation, but peer-to-peer can also be very helpful in terms of capacity building. You know, if you've got board members or donors who can help in a very considered way with your knowledge of somebody's capacity, that is a really helpful thing to do. So Yahoo Finance is another one. There are lots of tools out there depending upon your ability to purchase or use them. So again, with major gifts, it's really important as you have these conversations to develop trust, not only in the organization itself, but in you as a frontline development professional. You know, make sure that you are treating this person with high respect, that you're always truthful and honest about what's going on at the organization. If things aren't going so well, you don't share all of the dirt, if you will, but you want to make sure that people trust you and they trust that your organization is doing what it's saying that it is doing. It's having an impact on those around us. Not all of us are putting food on people's tables or giving housing, but there are a lot of important things that are happening with the organizations that are represented here today. So help people understand that. And don't give people proposals that are 40 pages long. I don't think it's really necessary to make a proposal that looks like War and Peace. Make sure that they're clear. Make sure that you are articulating things about the organization that will make them feel good, that the organization has integrity, that it is making a difference in its particular field. Make sure that you lay out how their gift will truly make a difference. And in that context, don't overpromise. Don't say that you're going to accomplish something with that gift, and yet you don't, because that is the surest way to end that relationship. We all have lots of stories. I won't go into any of the ones that I've experienced, but there are lots of stories where people have overpromised, underdelivered, and you've wrecked that relationship. And it's really important to work with donors on how you want to recognize that contribution. Some people like to be anonymous because they don't want their name out there so that 100 other organizations are coming after them. Some people just do it because they want to make a difference and they don't really care about recognition. But there are a lot of people who give for whom the recognition is important. Look at all of the things that are named. I mean, I can't walk through the field without seeing somebody's name on a wall, which is a great thing. There are a lot of people who care deeply about what the museum is doing, but they also like the fact that when others walk around the museum, they see that that donor has embraced what we do and given in very generous ways. And use lots of different ways to thank them. We all send automated thank you letters. We send personal thank you letters. I like to handwrite notes to people. Blair mentioned thank you, which is something that we did wonderfully at DePaul in having the students say thank you on a very short video, which we sent to the donors throughout the year. And it was very, very helpful. And I'm sure that you could do a short video with people that you're impacting and send that to certain donors. And again, stay in touch with people. Don't thank them and then not communicate with them until you're ready to solicit them again. Use this balance of communicating with people, bring them up to date, send them occasional messages without asking. Here is something significant that's going on with the organization. Tell stories, do things that don't make them afraid to receive messages from you. So, I was kind of hoping that we might get a donor or two to join us on this, but it didn't work out. But I canvassed a lot of people about why they give to the organizations that I've represented before. Some of this has come as I've talked with them during my career. Some of them in the last couple of weeks, I asked specifically why people give, what inspires them. And these are some of the things that I have heard. Very often, donors have said to me, the work that you've done, the conversations we've had have helped to build this confidence in the organization, trust in what you do. You accomplish what you promise you're going to accomplish, but you're making a difference in Chicago or the world or the state or whatever that organization is representing. You're making a difference. And somebody else said to me, you've used my support in ways that help me see that I'm making a difference. You're very transparent about things. this donor that I referred to earlier that went from a $5,000 gift to a $1.3 million gift. I worked with Betty and her husband for probably a year and a half. And just about this time last year, I was in touch with her and she said, you know, you've been really respectfully persistent. You've finally worn us down. We're going to make this commitment. Then, of course, it took another 7 months before they actually signed the papers. But, you know, I worked with them. I stayed in touch with them, but at least I tried not to annoy them, if you will. Because she said to me, you know, I was always happy to take your call because I knew that you were going to respect us and our timing and so forth. I've had other people say, you know, even though my gift isn't as large as so-and-so's, you made me feel really good about that. And you made me feel like I was making a difference with my gift of whatever size that might have been. So
Yeah, I think, and I can attest to people saying the same delightfully kind, wonderful things about Bill that I think are a testament to the type of relationship and trust that he has built with them. Because I think getting folks to pick up the phone can be a challenge in itself. So if someone is wanting to do that because they know that that you have built this meaningful relationship with them, that is not just a constant solicitation, that shows. I think another way to kind of think about and experiences that I've had with folks in thinking about people who have made a gift, you know, the gift of their lifetime or of their family's lifetime. I was thinking of some specific stories and seem to fall in these three categories, which I've heard folks mention previously about what inspires someone to give a transformative gift for themselves and for, you know, your organization, of course. I think gifts that are an honor or memory of someone that is aligned with something that that person or their family cared deeply about. I think it is really important and incumbent on us and organizations who receive gifts like this to be extremely thoughtful in how we follow up and how we steward these gifts. I think often automated stewardship does not capture the spirit of the message that needs to be shared with folks who, you know, we should be honored with being able to be a part of their memory and legacy. And so I think it can be really both tremendously meaningful for those families or friends, you know, colleagues who are honoring and remembering someone, and also something that requires really careful and thoughtful stewardship. Gifts to prevent something from happening to someone else. So I have worked with donors who have had a really difficult time. You know, they were working all through school. They had to take a break from going to school because that they could not keep up, you know, with their schoolwork and work and supporting their family, who had other really difficult experiences happen to them. I think you can draw very easy parallels here with any organizations who work in the health space or in research, because you know, you've seen someone in your family or yourself experience something that you never want someone else to go through again. So if you can make a gift that will impact research or treatment or care to ease someone else's burden, I think can be significant and is a reason that people often go beyond perhaps their annual giving to make a larger commitment. And then gifts that pay it forward because they have had a wonderful experience, whether that's with your institution or in a, you know, in a mentorship capacity. I think I saw some folks from Girl Scouts here who, you know, I know that those experiences can be a part of, you know, someone's journey for a lifetime. For many years, I've worked in support of Children's Miracle Network hospitals, which is a large network of children's hospitals. And we had incredible stories of what we would call grateful patient stories. So children whose families had this amazing experience, who were treated with the care and highest quality of service and treatment and support, and wanted to pay it forward to other families to be able to have that type of support and experience. And I think maybe one other kind of story that's maybe captured in that is also folks who want to leave a legacy and to have some sort, to have a transformative impact on an issue or on an organization. I worked with someone who, and this is why I will always think of real estate, as Bill said, as like not the greatest indicator of someone's capacity to give. But I worked with someone who had very outwardly modest appearing capacity. They had been an annual donor to the organization for many years. And I would every single day go through the gift report, go through recent gifts, and thank anyone who had made a gift, who either was to a college I was supporting or who graduated from that college. And she and I began talking because of that and staying in more regular contact. And that became the largest gift that I had closed by myself at the organization, because we had stayed in contact. And though she had very outwardly modest capacity, she had been a tremendous saver and really wanted to utilize her estate and leave a legacy that would continue on, really to each of these categories. It was in honor of someone close to her. It would prevent others from having to have the difficult experience that she had in juggling so many things, and also help them have the really positive experience that she had at the university. And so I think no type of research will replace having those meaningful conversations with people, because as you build relationships and trust, you can really find yourself in a situation to help facilitate something really incredible with your donor and in support of your organization.
Yeah, and speaking of that, real estate and looking at people's capacity based on where they live. When I was working at the University of Maryland many years ago, this didn't come to us, but there was a modest annual fund donor to the veterinary school, and when he passed away, he gave $16 million to the school. Lived in an extremely humble house, had never been married. Was just very diligent about investing, but nobody knew it. He was completely under the radar. So this is why it's really important to pay attention and do good stewardship with all of your donors, because you never know when somebody's going to do something way beyond what you think their capacity is. Blair, and one other quick thing, I just realized that every time I look at the chat, everybody sees the chat. So if you would just keep an eye on the chat, to see if there's some good questions or comments. And then we've left a little bit of time at the end. We will come back. So just going to talk very briefly about planned giving, because that could be a topic in and of itself. And I think we probably have one coming up through the Philanthropy Club later in this year. But, it's very much integrated with major and annual gifts. There are lots of tools. At DePaul, we utilized something that I found to be really helpful. It's called an estate confirmation form, and I'm happy to send anybody an outline for that if you're interested. But it was essentially a 1.5-page document. Didn't have a ton of legalese. It was a non-binding document, but it allowed people to articulate something about their estate plans. There was a place, I tried to get the people with whom I work, the donors, to give some specificity to the gift, but it would give you an opportunity for them to say, I'm going to do this in my estate plan, and this is how I would like it recognized. And it was an extremely helpful tool that didn't turn people off. No offense to all of the documents that have a lot of legalese. They're really important, but this was a very non-threatening document for people that allowed them to tell you what their plans might be. So again, depending upon somebody's stage in life, you want to be talking with them. You want to at least have your organization sharing the opportunity for planned gifts, whether it is, there are lots of tools out there. There are gift annuities. There are charitable remainder trusts where, they take the income for a period of years and then they give it the principal to the organization. The exact opposite of that is a lead trust, where they give you the income from it for a period of years, and at the end it goes back to them. And there are lots of tax ramifications. And again, we won't go into that, but planned giving is something that you should develop a little bit of knowledge about. Some of you probably have a lot of knowledge about it, but utilize it in your organization. Make it part of your overall advancement or development strategies. Anything else, Blair?
Yeah, to that end, I think it's important whether or not someone documents their planned gift to celebrate and steward them. If someone has told you that they are in your estate plans, even if they, don't want to have any kind of documentation, they feel, what's in their will, of course, supersedes everything else. But having that knowledge and then engaging those folks meaningfully, again, whether or not they document that officially, I think it's a deeply personal thing to choose to do, and I think represents a tremendous commitment to your organization. And so you want to celebrate that, even if they don't do something formally to document it.
Yeah, we have something here at the Field Museum called the Air Society, named for one of the early influencers of the field, Edward Air. And there are, I want to say, 171 members in this group. And of that, there are only 68, I believe, who have given a specific amount of money that they plan to give to us, which is really kind of cool and exciting that you never know what you're going to get from all of the other individuals. But I will work with this group. As I mentioned, I'm just into this position here 2 weeks, but I've already begun to reach out to them and find out why they've made that decision to include us in their estate plans. And it makes for some really wonderful conversations. So here are some final thoughts, and then we'll break off and look at the chat and see if you've got some questions for us. So I've years and years ago, when I was first starting out, I had a part-time job. I worked for a guy who did listening seminars for major corporations in Westchester County, New York. And I learned from that that how to be a better listener, not just sharing, which we all want to do. We want to talk with donors. We want to tell them about all the great things that are going on and how they can have an impact. But I tell you, I have benefited so much by paying attention to listening. And one of the favorite phrases that he had was, "Don't listen with your answer running." So don't make it look like you just can't wait for the person to stop talking, or worse, you're interrupting them. But you never know what you're going to pick up from people. Ask questions that allow them to tell you lots of things. And believe me, people will tell you much more than you expect, sometimes much more than you want to know. But lay those questions out. And be gracious, be genuine in who you are. And all of you probably are like this. I don't know many of you, but make that donor or that prospect happy to talk with you. And Justin, with his music this morning, just it brought out a smile in me. But I try to approach every day like that, thanking God for the opportunity to live and to do what I do, and that I will be grace-filled in that day. So do that, and you will be just amazed at what kind of reaction you get from donors. And give them more than they expect. when you're doing stewardship, obviously an immediate thank you is important, but go beyond that. Let them know periodically what that gift is doing, even if it's a small gift. That gift has been collectively part of something larger. So make them feel really, really good about having done whatever they did for your organization. And be like a private eye or a CIA person. Be observant. Look around. If you're out meeting with somebody in their offices or their homes, look around and see what's on their mantle. Look at the photographs, or look at the certificates on their wall, or the art on their wall, or see what it is that makes them tick. Just take that observation. You'll find it to be very, very beneficial to what you do. So,
yeah, we've got a wonderful amount of questions in the chat, which I think being hearkening back to being gracious and genuine, I think another important characteristic is to be genuinely curious about someone and what's interesting to them. And so all these questions to me say that we have some wonderfully curious folks here. So scrolling back up, so we didn't miss anyone. We talked a little bit, I think, about Mackenzie's question related to assigning folks between donors. I think there's a lot more strategy to that related to annual, that we could spin off and talk about related to looking at the capacities of folks to assign them to the leadership annual giving or annual giving team, trying to get them to a certain threshold. And then at what point, do they move on, and having some sort of structured process to that. Michael shared something great about for new organizational partners. So sometimes if something is in the news, they've accepted a new role, they started a new organization or have business news. I think this is a great kind of making a cold email introduction warm by congratulating them on that, mentioning how excited you are for them and that you'd love to catch up, introducing yourself. Linda shared, I think these were related to other strategies for engaging major gifts or ways that folks are engaged with that, hosting events that that major gift donors and prospects are invited to, looking at what their business objectives are. I think also with like the pervasiveness of things like LinkedIn, people are sharing like what is deeply personal to them sometimes on the internet even. So looking at, what folks are sharing and what they're involved in and how you connect with that. We talked a little bit about over communicating with annual donors. Betsy has a question about, I think, ultimately kind of the difference between a major and a principal gift, or in their organization, a mega gift donor. So how do you differentiate between people who give major or principal gifts annually versus a major gift that's above and beyond their annual capacity? So for them, maybe $1,000 is not a major gift, but for the organization it is. And how do you kind of tailor your communication and engagement with them? I think that knowledge in itself would be enough, in my mind, to like specially code them in your system so that you're being very appreciative and making sure that they are closely engaged, but also would call for maybe a conversation about what would a mega or principal level conversation look like with them. So maybe separating them out of your normal processes because they've demonstrated or told you that $1,000 or even $10,000 isn't considered a major gift to them.
Rich, and I'm sorry, didn't mean to jump.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, so Rich, that's a really interesting question. Rich Gage, one of our legendary members of the Philanthropy Club of Chicago, which, by the way, before we leave, we'll have Jennifer talk a little bit about the P Club. But Rich says, can you give some examples of how you deal with a prospective donor whom you learn has accumulated wealth illegally or because of questionable business practices? Yeah, i.e. the Sacklers. Yeah, that's a really important question. You know, the temptation, of course, is to take a major gift regardless, because somebody wants to support you. But, you know, I've been a part of organizations that have actually turned down gifts. Again, going back to my dinosaur type age and experience, when I was working at University of Maryland, we had somebody from one of the tobacco companies want to make a major gift, and we actually did not take it. And there are different philosophies about it. We could probably spend a whole session on, you know, are you compromising the standards and values of your organization if you do this? And I think it's a decision that you have to make personally, and we welcome other comments in here. But you know, I think you have to maintain the integrity of your organization. And if you're taking a gift from somebody who has accumulated that wealth on the backs of others, or at the detriment of others, or in some other kind of surreptitious way, you know, you really have to think twice about taking that gift, because ultimately it'll drive away some other important contributors to you. And
I think,
go ahead, Bill.
yeah, I think too that it may also be in direct opposition of the mission of your organization. So is it really furthering, you know, what you're trying to do? I think, and I'll share this in the chat, I don't know, and if anybody is here from Sierra Club, please feel free to chime in. But I do think that this is current to 2020, perhaps, so it may have been updated again, but I think having and pushing for a gift acceptance policy and outlining these terms, you know, and processes, at least even for escalating conversations like this within your organization, and who are the decision makers before you're in that situation would be ideal. And so Sierra Club here, I put in the chat this gift acceptance policy, and I think they are very direct as to, you know, gifts that will be accepted if they are, you know, furthering the mission, and not accepting gifts that are inconsistent with their mission, have a conflict of interest, you know, or endanger, you know, the public's trust in the organization based on, you know, the individual that it's being received from. I do think and want to credit Jennifer Holmes and Amelia Garza. I hope everyone's familiar with the Fundraiser Bill of Rights that they authored and speak tremendously about, I would say, in making sure that your frontline fundraisers are prepared and feel empowered should there be, whether it's, you know, something very publicly known like Rich's example, or, you know, should something happen with a donor that puts that individual either at risk or is in direct, you know, is a direct conflict with the mission of your organization, that your fundraisers should feel empowered to not just continue with more of the same and just accept that these are the conditions under which, you know, they have to operate with a donor. And so I would encourage folks to, and I'll try to put that in the chat as well, because I do think it's related both to the engagement and empowerment and retention and support of your employees, and also ultimately to the dynamics that we have with our donors.
And Rich asked the follow-on question, how do you negotiate your being friends with a major donor remaining professionally detached? You know, that is a hard thing. I've had that in my life or my career in the past, where I've tried to work with somebody that I know very well, and it can be a little bit delicate, but I think you also have to be just upfront with them and say, you know what, I appreciate your friendship. Today I'm talking with you not only as a friend, but in my capacity as an advancement professional with this organization that you care about and that I care about. And, you know, would you be interested in taking that relationship further through a major gift? And if anybody else wants to share their own experiences with that, please do that in the chat as well.
Yeah, I think having, particularly when I've worked with folks related to planned gifts or folks who maybe our engagement in phone calls or events and opportunities to connect in person are really have an outsized amount of their social engagement. And I say that in the, you know, kindest terms possible, that, you know, being invited to and participating in these things is so special, not only because they're connected, but because particularly after the pandemic, I think there was a widespread feeling of isolation amongst many of the communities and donors that we work with. And so I think building those relationships has been some of the most meaningful part of what I've done. And I think trying to, in some capacity, talk about fundraising each time. And that isn't asking them, but that's thanking them again for their support and how grateful we are to have them as a part of our community. And so it's similar to Bill's note, you know, a distinction that this is still related to and part of, you know, my role versus just always a social call, I guess.
I want to go back to an earlier comment, not a question, from Linda Dunleavy about events, you know, and we all have them and we use them, and sometimes events can be a ton of work for not necessarily a ton of immediate financial return, but if events are done really well, they bring out the best. They can bring out the best in your organization. They can showcase it, as Linda says, making a great impression in the company of peers of donors, and there are some really, really creative events among organizations here in Chicago, and if you've got any great ideas, throw them in the chat as well. So Jennifer, do you want to talk briefly about the P Club?
Well, good morning, everyone. I apologize for not being on camera, but you all would thank me if you saw what I look like. So the Philanthropy Club of Illinois is a couple of decades old, and the purpose of the Philanthropy Club is to bridge the gap between larger nonprofits who have access to grant funding and social capital, and then those smaller nonprofits, whether it's smaller in staff or smaller in budget, or both. Our goal is simply to ensure that every nonprofit organization that's serving communities in Illinois has the same access to capital as another organization. And so we reach our goal by having sessions 10 months out of the year. You won't see us in December and January because, you know, we're raising money, but you'll see us 10 months out of the year having these sessions the first Tuesday of every month from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. on some aspect of fundraising. So for 2024, there are two things that you can expect from us. You can expect sessions on access to capital, where we will have funders in the sessions that you can learn from and ask questions to. The second thing that you can expect from us is skill building sessions like this one, where we're talking specifically about the relationship cycle process and how, as frontline fundraisers or team members of fundraisers, how we can get better at doing the work that we do, because we know that we are making a difference in the lives of individuals who live in the communities that we serve. So please look out for the Philanthropy Club sessions every single month. Please register. Please bring your friends. It's free. All you got to do is register. And so after each session, you will have a follow-up email, which will include the slides that we show during each presentation, as well as how to connect with any of the panelists that we have during our session. So our goal is equity. And if we can never be better at our work, we're always happy to hear from you. I'll drop my email in the chat so that you can reach out to me if you have any questions or suggestions about sessions we might consider. Thank you.
And I just put my email address in the chat. Blair, drop yours in as well. feel free to reach out to either of us. We're happy to talk, and we are greatly appreciative for what you do to advance all of these wonderful organizations in Chicago. There are several members of the P Club. Are we called a board or just a planning committee, Jennifer? But of course, Justin, with all his great music, just lifts our spirits every time we start these things. And there's Jackie and Jackie Davidoff and Rich, and I don't know who else is here, but you can raise your hand and got questions. Do you guys have anything you want to share? Okay.
Feel free to move forward, Bill. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I would just like to thank Bill for his organization and leadership on this, and Jennifer Holmes, well known and regarded, I would say, across Chicago, Illinois, and far, far beyond. So thank you so much for your leadership and all that you do in this space and others, and would be happy to connect with anyone at any time, and wish you all the best in your fundraising, and know that this is not, hopefully we help to communicate that this is not top secret on a, that I think any position, any organization, that all of our fundraising work and skills are transferable to this. And so really great to be with you all this morning.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy your day. Do well. Be gracious. Have fun. Enjoy what you do.
Thanks all.
Okay. Thanks, Blair.
Thanks, Bill.